Okay, so in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do some very basic customizations of Emacs. So here I'm going to fire it up again. New Emacs 26.3. This is going to be my fresh Emacs installation. And so one of the things that I like to do is I like to adjust the font size so that it looks nice. So here I do a Google search for EmacsWiki font size. EmacsWiki has all sorts of great documentation. So here's the page that describes how to change the font size. So here's changing font size. So here, as a first pass, you can do zooming the buffer text incrementally. So this is useful if you're like giving a presentation or if you want to just, briefly edit the text size and not permanently. So here it says you can use Control X, Control plus, and Control X, Control minus to increase or decrease the buffer text size. So here, Control X, Control plus makes it a little bigger. And then here in the mini buffer down here, it says use plus minus 0 for further adjustment. So here I can keep pressing plus, and I can keep getting bigger text in this particular buffer. And then I can do minus, and then the text in that particular buffer gets smaller. And I can press 0, and it goes back to the original size. But that's not exactly what I want, right? Because here you see that the text only in the buffer is changing, but the size of all this other text in the mini buffer and this little mode line is not changing. So what I'd like to do is I'd just like to increase the size of everything. So let's see how to do that. So I have there's a bunch of different instructions here. And so here it says resize frame font using list. You can change the size of a font using the current frame non-incrementally using set face attribute with a height parameter. So that's pretty much exactly what we want to do. So here this is a Emacs function set face attribute. So we can look at its documentation using Control H, then F, which is describe function. And here I'm going to type the name of the function that we want, set face attribute. And here that pulls up the help page for the set face attribute function. And it gives you a link to the source code if you want to take a look at how it was defined in the Emacs list code. But it says to set the attributes of face on frame from arcs. So if frame is nil, set the attributes for all existing frames as well as the default for new frames. So that's what we want. We want to put frame, this second argument here, as nil. So, and then the face, I guess here we should specify the face default. There's a bunch of different faces here, but the default one is going to be like the kind of default one that's going to affect the display of everything. And so the rest args here must come in pairs attribute value, and so what we're going to be using here is colon height 100. So it says set the height attribute of the default face to 100. So let's do that. And so, I mean, the way you can interactively execute Lisp code like this to customize Emacs is you can open up this scratch buffer. So here I use some keyboard commands to open up the scratch buffer. This is a buffer that's always open in all of your Emacs. You can also just go to the menu and find the scratch buffer if you have your menu shown. So this is a buffer that is for text that is not saved and for Lisp evaluation. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this line of code, which is Emacs Lisp code. So I used a Control C in my web browser to copy that to the clipboard. And here in Emacs, I'm going to use Control Y, which is the yank command, to paste that or yank that into my Emacs buffer. And so here now I have this piece of Emacs list code. And here instead of selected frame, I'm going to put nil right? Because if frame is nil, it's setting the attributes for all existing frames as well as for default for new frames. So let's do that. So here it says set face attribute default nil height 100. So this is going to set the height on all existing frames of the default face to 100. So to execute this piece of Emacs list code, what I do is I go to the end of the line after that close parentheses, and I execute the command Control X, Control E, which means to execute the list command. And you see nothing happened because I guess the default is 100. So let's change that. Here I'm using Alt B to go back one word. Control D for deleting the next character, and then I'm inserting a 2, then Control E, skipping back to the end of the line, Control X, Control E to execute that line of code. And now you see that everything is a lot bigger now, which will make it a lot easier to see what's going on, right, when I'm doing these tutorials. So here we can adjust, maybe it's a little bit too big here, so you can adjust the size of the window to fit on your screen. But so now what do we want to do? I mean, what do we do if we want to have this size of text every time we start up, right? So that's what the .emacs file is for. So if we're just executing our Emacs list commands in the scratch buffer, it's not saved, just like it says at the top there, and it's not going to set the text height to 200 every time we start up. It's just going to do it this once for this one session, and when we quit Emacs, we're going to have that small text again. But so if we want to keep that customization for the next time we start up Emacs, what we can do is we can copy this line of code into our .emacs file, which is our user-specific customization file. So here I'm using Control A to go to the beginning of the line, Control K for killing that entire line. So that's copying it to the clipboard you can think of. And then after that, I'm going to use Control X, Control F, and that's going to open up our find file buffer in the mini buffer down here. And here I'm going to type .emacs, which is going to open up my .emacs file in my home directory. So initially, my .emacs file is empty, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Control Y to yank that Emacs list code that changes the font size, and I'm going to put that in my .emacs. And then after that, I'm going to use Control X, Control S to save that Emacs, that buffer. So it says it wrote.emacs down at the bottom there. And now I'm going to use Control X, Control C to exit Emacs. And now let's start it up again to prove to ourselves that that customization is actually working. So here it starts out small and it gets big because it applied that customization that we had in the .emacs. So, you know, it's kind of annoying then to have to redo this, window resizing every time. So that's another customization that we can do. So let's try to do a Google search for that. EmacsWiki window full screen height. Yeah. So here we can go to this full screen page on the EmacsWiki, and it has a bunch of different ways to do this. And so one way here is in the beginning it says you can give Emacs some command line arguments to tell it to do that. So here this is to actually maximize the window in the beginning. That would be like clicking like this, but if we don't want that, we can try the full height setting where maybe I don't want the full screen, maybe I want the full height. So how do I maximize my Emacs height on startup? Let's try that instead. Right. Maximize frame vertically. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I like to do. So, I know I have that in my previous .emacs customization. So I'm going to just see if we can find that and see if that's the same thing. So here I have my old .emacs file in .emacs-tdh, which I just suppressed for the purposes of this demo. And here you can see that the second line in this old .emacs file is set frame parameter nil, full screen, full height. So let's copy that to our new .emacs file, and let's see what happens. So yeah, I mean, to understand what this is doing, again, we can try to get help on this function, right? So here we can type Control H, Control F, and that's going to take a default to whatever function that we had our cursor on. And here it's set frame parameter. Here it says set frame parameter to value on frame. If frame is nil, which it is, it defaults to the selected frame. So this is, I guess, the default window. And so I guess it has some further documentation about modify frame parameters. So full screen, full height, I guess, are probably documented under here at some point. Right. So let's just quit Emacs and open it up again. There we go. And now we see that our Emacs is opening up to full height with our big text. And so these are two customizations that we put into our .emacs file. Some other customizations that I like to do are, instead of having these menus show up all the time to kind of suppress them, you can do that interactively by Alt-X, menu bar mode. That'll get rid of the menu bar at the top. You can do Meta X toolbar mode. That'll get rid of that toolbar at the top. And, again, if we want to do those at each startup, we can do toolbar mode. And here, let's get help to see again. Toggle the toolbar mode in all graphical frames. It says with optional argument, enable it if arg is positive and disable it otherwise. So if called from list, enable toolbar mode if it's omitted or nil. So let's call it toolbar mode 0 because that's going to disable toolbar mode, right? So let's here do menu bar mode, and here let's look at the help page for that. Toggle display of menu bar on each frame with a prefix argument arg, enable menu bar mode if arg is positive and disable it otherwise. Okay, so same kind of thing. So we put menu bar mode 0, and these two should inhibit the display of the menu bar and the toolbar, which I don't really use, so that's why I turn them off in my .emacs. Here in our new Emacs 26-23, now we start up and we don't have the toolbar or the menu bar. But we do have that now the window is too big again, right? So that's funny. So I guess what we can do is alter the order of these things, right? So I guess if we put the toolbar mode, menu bar mode first, that will fix the issue, right? So there we go. So first it gets rid of the menu bar and toolbar, and then it makes the window full height. finally, I mean, the last kind of like basic customization that I do usually is I get rid of this like startup or splash screen. And I forget exactly what the command is, but here you can do Control H A. I think it's splash screen or something. So I search for stop displaying the splash screen buffer. That's not exactly what I want. Maybe it's inhibit splash screen. Maybe it's a variable. Control H V inhibit. Here I press the tab to get some completions. Inhibit splash screen. I think that's what I'm looking for. So here let's describe that variable, see what the Emacs help says. It says inhibit splash screen is a variable defined here. Its value is nil. Non-nil inhibits the startup screen. So that's what I want. So here, what we have to do now is go back into our .emacs. And here, all of these commands, what we're doing is we're calling different Emacs list functions like set base attribute, toolbar mode, menu bar mode, set frame parameter, etc. Right? But now what we have here, I'm going to go back here. I did Control X O to go back to the other window I have open here. I do Control X B to open up that help screen that we were just looking at. And here, you know, this is a variable that we want to customize. And so to customize a variable, what we do is we use this Emacs list function called setq. And so here we have some interactive help that's popping up, setq symbol value. And so what we do is we write inhibit splash screen 0. And what that's going to do is when Emacs starts up, it's going to set the value of that variable inhibit splash screen to 0. And so in fact you can look Control H F to get help on the setq function, and you can see it's a special form that says set each symbol to the value of its val. The symbols are the variables, they are literal, not evaluated. The values val are expressions, they are evaluated. Right, so setqx 1 plus y, blah blah blah, right? Anyway, so that's going to set the value of the inhibit splash screen variable so that that startup screen is not shown every time. So let's see what it looks like now. Okay, so now my Emacs starts up and I don't have that splash screen, I just have this scratch buffer. And so that's what I usually do for my basic Emacs customizations. I hope that was helpful. We've gone over a little bit how to use Google searching to find how to customize Emacs, how to look on the EmacsWiki, how to add some customizations in the .emacs, and how to edit, evaluate Lisp code. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.